Hi, I'm Shonda Miles. I am a business consultant, and today I just want to talk to you about I am amazed at the number of companies who have mandatory cybersecurity training, sexual harassment training, all these different mandatory trainings. And I get it. I'm not devaluing these trainings because I believe that it's important that we have sexual harassment training, right, in cybersecurity. I think there's value there. We have to be trained on these security measures. So I believe that they're important. What I also think is important is that employers make it mandatory that every single employee that a part of their onboarding, a part of their initial training, they go through some type of anger management training. Every single employee goes through some type of anger management training because a lot of times we can eliminate shootings, right? We can eliminate a lot of mass shootings. We can eliminate a lot of workplace violence if we teach people how to handle anger. And let's just be honest, in 100% of the time we haven't been trained in any capacity how to deal with our emotions, how to deal with our anger. And so how can we expect people not to come back and have this workplace violence or, these mass shootings if they're not taught how to deal with their anger? And so I believe, I've talked about this before, that schools should have anger management training. I believe that everyone should go through emotional intelligence training. It should be mandatory because how are people supposed to know how to deal with their emotions unless they go to counseling? Or how are people supposed to know how other people handle their emotions if we're not trained? And how are we going to do? A lot of people don't even know that this is required, this is necessary, this is how we have better lives. And so if we don't mandate it in every capacity from kindergarten on up, how are people supposed to know how to deal with it? How are stressed out parents supposed to how are they supposed to deal with it? I believe that every employee should go through some type of business acumen training because, I go to a fast food place and they give me 7 ketchups. And probably 90% of the time, I don't eat ketchup at all. And so I just think about what a waste, right? Or I go and get breakfast and I get 2 strawberry jellies and 2 grape jellies. And all I need is 1. So 4 jellies, so 3 wasted. And so if an employee is not trained on business acumen, how in the world are they supposed to know? How do they know how they get paid? How do they know when a company is profitable? How are they supposed to know? And then I think it's important that we teach people just basic. We can just do basic business acumen, but employees need to know business acumen, conflict resolution. From the time we're, we can go to the playground and play, 3 years old, we should be taught how to resolve conflict. But I mean, up until we're 80, 90 to the grave, we should be going through some type of training. And I believe it's like mandatory, just like we hear the same thing over and over again, sexual harassment training, we have to go through it. We should be going through conflict resolution because how do we know how to deal with conflict if we don't? You got people who don't say a word. They have issues. They're upset. Somebody hurt them. Somebody was disrespectful and they stay silent. Year after year after year after year, they say nothing. They just let people run all over them. They let people be disrespectful. How can people have to be taught how to resolve conflict? And so it should be mandatory that, and I think these trainings really should be every 6 months, but people need to know how to resolve conflict because sometimes we have issues and we learn how to resolve them and then we forget, right? So it's like a constant. We need just every 6 months, we need to be trained on how to, be emotional intelligence, how to resolve conflict, how to work with a team, how to work with people. How do we deal with people with attitudes and people that are different from us, people who are pessimistic, people who are narcissistic? How do we deal with them unless we're trained? And so we know that 90% of the time people are not going to learn it on their own. They think they know everything already, and that's why they have so many problems. But if we take the time to train people every 6 months, okay, this is how you handle conflict. This is how you handle your emotions. This is what happens when you get angry. This is what you need to do This is how you solve a problem. And instead of, I think a lot of people's their how they problem solve is to blame other people. How they solve problems is to blame other people. That's what they do. That's how they think they're solving a problem. But people have to be taught, how do I solve a problem? How do I keep from going to somebody else? How do I keep blaming somebody else? How do I stop complaining about this problem and sit down and say, okay, if I really want to solve it, this is what I need to do. People need to be taught how to solve problems. And the last one is communicating effectively. A lot of times we think we've communicated and we haven't. And so we've got to be taught how to communicate effectively. And this is I believe this is ongoing as well. Just like we go through the sexual harassment training, we got to be reminded, we can improve. And I think, these things, if we go through training every 6 months, we can just constantly build on the skills. We can just constantly get better. And so I believe that it should be mandatory, that employers should make this mandatory, that every employee goes through these types of trainings, because we're not equipped to handle. We're not equipped. We don't have these skills to deal with people on a regular basis. And so when we hire people, we have to have a plan. Okay, this is a plan. Okay, they go through this training hour every week, the whole year, or something like that, where employees can be better. How can they be better? How can they be better unless they're taught? And so employees are not going to automatically know this. They're not going to automatically know how to communicate effectively. I mean, I've never been through a conflict resolution training as an employee, never. But we still have conflict every single day with other employees. We're passive aggressive. We're passive. We got to know how to be assertive. How do I handle conflict? What happens when I disagree with the coworker that I'm stuck working with? How do I deal with that? And so just these are things that employers need to be thinking about, is how do I incorporate this so that the people that I hire, the people who work for me, and not only that, but we have to know how to do it to handle customers. What if I have a conflict with a customer? What about communicating effectively with the customer or a client? We got to know how to do that. And so in order to do that, we got to be trained. We're not going to just know. In most cases, people are not going to know. People haven't even thought about it. They just know that they got a conflict that hasn't been resolved. They're upset about something that happened. So we got to take time to train. If you're an employer, to train your employees. If you're an employee, you can buy books and you can buy courses and you can learn yourself. But if not, then it's on the employer to, train their people if they care about the organization. If you're an individual, you can learn all this stuff on your own. You can just create your personal professional development plan, and then you can start doing this yourself. You can start learning on your own. And so there's a link below if you're interested. You can learn how to communicate effectively. You can learn how to resolve conflict. It's completely up to you, but if you're an individual, you don't have to depend on your employer. If you're an employer, you ought to, in order to run a very effective organization, these things are important. These training these things are important. So just think about that. There's a link below if you're interested, if you're an employer. There's a link below if you're interested, if you're an employee, if you need help with these areas.